And welcome to another edition of the Throwing Bagels Podcast. Kevin Mooney here with you alongside Jason Hamo. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you, sir?
I am doing well.
And we are also joined, as always, by Chris Douglas. Hey, Chris.
Kevin, how are you?
I am great. And how are you this fine evening?
I'm doing wonderful.
Before we introduce him, I do want to thank Ray Martell, the executive director of New York Mets baseball on CBS Radio, for helping arrange this interview. So joining us now is the play-by-play voice of the New York Mets on WCBS Radio, alongside Pat McCarthy and Mets Hall of Famer Howie Rose. It's our pleasure to welcome in Keith Raad. Hey, Keith.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, Jason. Hey, Chris. I think I flowed that in with your vibe, right? The opening.
Very good. Very good.
That was perfect.
You're a professional.
Keith, shortly after the season ended last year, your colleague Pat McCarthy was injured when he was struck by a car while out jogging. He was training for a half marathon. Can you give us an update on how he's doing these days?
Sure. So amazingly and thankfully and luckily, he's good to go. He is, I guess you'd say, close to 100%. If you know Pat McCarthy, you know that he's as bubbly a character as you'll find anywhere in the world. And I just talked to him the other day, and he was as bubbly a character as I'd ever find in the world. So I think he's ready to go for the season. But 10 broken ribs,
wow,
a little plastic surgery. A really scary scene for him and his family. I know that there were a lot of people that sent their well wishes, so I'm sure he appreciates the three of you guys doing the same thing. But he's good to go, and we'll be sharing the microphone pretty soon here in Florida.
A year ago, the team entered spring training with Buck Showalter as the manager. They had World Series expectations. Season went about as badly as it could have gone. So what are the expectations around this team under rookie manager Carlos Mendoza?
Yeah, so certainly much different, and I think it's hard to split two different eras, which I think we're really starting a new era of Mets baseball when you bring in a president of baseball operations, David Stearns, and you bring in a new manager, Carlos Mendoza. It's basically, okay, page one, but it's hard to forget about what happened last year and some of of course, those core pieces that are still on the team. And I think if you were to carry over basically any theme, is that these guys on the current roster who were here last year, Alonso and Lindor and Nimmo, they have a chip on their shoulder after last year. I mean, these guys are ticked with how it went down. I think they took a little bit of a shot in the arm, a shot in the gut, I should say, about what happened last year. And I think they're ready this year. But it really is, I hate to say it, you have to kind of close your eyes and start, okay, this is a new path, a new direction for the New York Mets with these two new guys.
With this core that they have right now, it's a pretty somewhat young core for the most part, but they're going to have a lot of young guys that they're trying to help out, bring in, they're trying to get Brett Beatty, they're trying to get Mark Vientos. Do you feel like they're going to be they'll be able to, help push them along the path where they're ready to go?
Yeah, so you have that main core with Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, and Lindor, and then Alvarez has been sensational as a catcher. Brett Beatty, they would love to just give him the keys to third forever and be the next David Wright. Those are obviously huge shoes to fill, but he's a first-round pick, so you kind of have that in your mind. And then other guys like Mark Vientos who are here. Where the future is coming is guys that are in AAA. Drew Gilbert, center fielder, who will probably be the center fielder of the Mets one day. Luis Angel Acuna, middle infielder they got from the Rangers and the Scherzer deal. And then some pitchers that we'll see this year: Mike Vassell, Christian Scott, Dom Hamill, who have been with the organization since getting drafted. So the future is coming. The wave is coming. I think we'll see a lot of those guys that you Mets fans may not know of yet, the Vassells and the Hamills, see them surface this year. But for guys like Brett Beatty, this is a year where he needs to turn the page of, okay, you got your feet wet. He played a lot of games last year. It wasn't as if he played 20 or 30 games. But this year he really has to kind of get down pat the mental hurdle that is playing in the major leagues. He can do it. I personally have seen him play in the minor leagues at a couple different levels. I know he's insanely talented. He just has to kind of figure it out, bring his talent to the field every single day. And David Stearns actually said the other day to us on CBS Radio, we had him for preseason interview, and he's hoping that Carlos Mendoza is that bridge, is the guy that's able to facilitate a great relationship between the minor leagues and the major leagues and get those guys accustomed to it. By contrast, you have Buck Showalter last year, who has been around the block, and you better know your stuff when you're talking to Buck. And it's just a different flavor of manager. He wanted the veteran to help him win the championship because it's a trusted player. He's here to win one now. And I think Carlos Mendoza's role while watching this whole team blossom is really hoping the young guys can blossom.
Mendoza's obviously a younger guy than Buck. So like you said, he's able to kind of help push these guys along. He addressed the entire team for the first time as the manager today. You're not down there right now. You're going to be down there, but what have you heard? How did that go?
Yeah, apparently it went very well. Everyone wants to get behind closed doors and hear exactly what is said. But I mean, think about it. If you're a Mets fan, you probably know what was said. I mean, Carlos Mendoza is coming in guns a-blazing. I mean, the outside noise, spring training is where the outside noise meets the actual reality of the players. You can hear the line of questioning from the reporters. The reporters are sticking microphones in these guys' faces saying, you're not supposed to be very good this year. How do you feel about that? You go, hold on a minute. I make a couple of $1 million a year. I'm pretty good at what I do. In that clubhouse, in that locker room, they know that there's always a chance to get in. As crazy as, last year's team, of course, they're going to make the playoffs. The question is, how many games would they go in the World Series? Well, they didn't even finish with an above 500 record. So you should literally have no idea. So going into this year, I think it's the same feeling with a little more young and youthful vibe and some different faces, is that they're good. The Mets are good. They have a great core of players. They have a solid lineup. If you write it down 1 through 9, they just have to basically put it together. And I don't really think they care about the line of questioning of, you guys aren't supposed to be that good. That doesn't mean anything to these guys because they're in it every single day.
So Pete Alonso met with the media last week for the first time and discussed his contract situation. Do you think there's any possibility that Pete signs an extension with the Mets before he becomes a free agent?
I don't, only because his agent is Scott Boras. If his agent was anybody else, I'd say maybe. But Scott has a reputation for holding out for the highest amount of money possible, and until you really hit the open market, do you find that out? So I think Scott is going to advise Pete to do that. Is it out of the realm of possibility? No, they could certainly strike a deal, but at the current state of free agency today, February 19th, look at the list of free agents that are still out there and how many of them are tied to Scott Boras.
Yeah.
Scott does a great job. He wants to get the most out of teams. He'd be my favorite agent if he was my agent, but it comes a time where, are you asking for too much? Are you not meeting the market? I think to answer your question, Alonso will probably go through the year and then end up hitting free agency.
So Lindor, what is a Boras client, and he signed that contract during spring trading a few years back. Do you think, I mean, obviously you said no, but do you possibly think there's any chance that, they could work something? I mean, they haven't spoken like Lindor and his agent and his, team had spoken previously to the Mets during that time.
I truly think that ship has sailed about the timing of it. I think they had that chance maybe last year going into the next to last year, the contract. That's really the great time for everybody to just sign on. Gets to a point where you're going, you know what? We've made it this far. Let's just a couple more months, see how you do this year, make it to free agency. Could guys bet on themselves and see a lot more dollar signs than normal, or they fall off a little bit and they may have missed the boat. I mean, there's what Aaron Judge did in his year is one story. What Michael Conforto did is another story. He turned down some money that maybe he should have, as we would probably say, signed on the dotted line. But I think it's just a little too late in the cycle to talk about that at this point for Pete.
I think a lot of Met fans, their worst nightmare is that Alonso hits free agency, he goes somewhere else, and the Mets are left with nothing. How confident would you be in Steve Cohen to make sure that he remains a Met for life if he does hit free agency?
So I remove my fan part of me when I talk about these kind of things, because I know that front offices, they love the heartbeat of a player, but unless you're talking dollars and cents and what are you going to get back, there's not much of a heartbeat in numbers. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he potentially gets moved at the deadline. at the trade deadline this year. It's a smart business move. Now, will I be crying my eyes out because I don't have somebody hitting 45, 50 home runs every year? Howie and I are on the edge of our seats.
Yeah.
Games tied up in the ninth. Pete's up. He's going to win the game right now. You will miss that, but I just think that it's a business decision for the Mets to at least consider what are our options? What will somebody give us? What does the team look like on July 1st? Are we in it? Are we out of it? All those factors will lead to a decision. I know Pete would love to stay a Met, but when you sign with Scott Boras, you want to stay a Met and you want to also get the most money that has ever been printed by the federal government. So it's a twofold thing. Pete's looking out for himself and the Mets, and the Mets have to look out for themselves as well. It has to be an even transaction or close to it.
Do you think, hypothetically, they trade him or he walks? Either way, they would push harder for a guy like Soto next year?
I think a lot of people might squirm in their chairs a little bit to have to make that decision because you have to factor in age, production. That's a tough question. I know that Steve Cohen has enough money to pay both of them, probably a few more than that. But again, it all comes down to, you're paying for this potentially long contract. If Pete and the Mets see a dollar figure that they both go, okay, that's fair, agree upon that, great. But if one party is asking for far too much, and even the fan, I have no info. If Pete is asking for $350 million over 10 years, is that a lot? Probably. Is it too? There's a point where things get to be too much, and it's just not a smart decision. I don't know. I think that I hope that they'll figure it out. I hope that they'll work it out. I know Pete will go into this year looking to hit 60 homers and drive in 3,000 RBIs to make everybody know that he wants to be a Met and stay here and deserve all that money. But the fact that it's taken this long means to me maybe there's a little disagreement with one side sliding over the piece of paper with the number on it and the other side going, I don't know.
It's an interesting dynamic because you could potentially be looking at a bidding war between the Mets and Yankees for both of those players. So.
Yes.
We haven't seen that, I don't think, ever.
I mean, Yamamoto, that's about the only one I could think of, right?
True.
Off season.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the rotation here for a second. So Kodai Senga is poised to be the ace of the staff. How does the rest of the rotation shake out? Or should we be a little bit excited about the rotation? Or what do you think?
Yeah, the way I see this rotation that David Stearns has built, certainly there's question marks on Luis Severino, but also he's probably one of the guys that I think, man, if they could really channel or find the old Severino for a little while in there, that would be excellent. I think, Sean Manaea coming in, Adrian Hauser coming in from Milwaukee. If you look at these guys' track record in the big leagues, their ERA is sitting at right about 4, which if you pitch 9 innings, you're giving up 4 runs. If you are pitching 6 innings, which most starters do, it's about 2 or 3 runs. That keeps you in the game. And I don't think this is supposed to be the sexiest starting rotation ever. I think the bullpen looks a little bit better than the rotation. And I just think the job of this starting 5, potentially 6, that's what Stearns has hinted at a little bit, is that just keep him in the game. And that's not the funnest thing ever. But if you remember last year, Scherzer was kind of a lost cause for a while. You didn't know what you're going to get. Verlander showed signs of it. Remember when Jose Quintana came back and it was like, wow, this guy, it feels like there's an adult in the room. He's just keeping you in the game. He's throwing 86. He's nibbling at the corners. And the Mets were in and could have won every single one of those games. I think that they're looking at a rotation of Jose Quintana-esque guys outside of Kodai Senga, who's an ace, to just keep you in the game. Go deep, give you some innings.
You mentioned the prospects earlier that are in AAA. You're, like I said earlier, you're going to be heading down to Port St. Lucie. What have you heard so far before you've gotten down there about the prospects that are down there right now, especially guys like a Mike Vassell, right, who potentially could be up this year at some point if the Mets need a starter, and depending on how he does in AAA, and among other Christian Scotts and those guys as well.
Yeah, so from what I'm told and expecting is that the first 3 games of spring training will be started by, I don't know the order, but it's Mike Vassell, Christian Scott, and Dominic Hamill. And a lot of that's by design. Usually the big guys, your big league starters aren't quite ready yet for the first weekend. But it's also the Mets saying, hey, you guys better be ready. We're putting you on a pedestal right away. So I think that there's a good chance we see all three of those guys. What I'm interested in is seeing how they are brought up to the big league level. Are they just thrown in spot starter, going to give us 5 or 6 starts each? Or is David Stearns going to do what he did in Milwaukee with Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff, guys that we probably know as household names right now, is use them as a piggybacker. So what does that mean? It means a starter by trade comes out of the bullpen and gives you 3, 4, 5 innings just to get their feet wet. And they did that for a couple of years, and then they became obviously now household names and big time starters. So I wonder about those young pitchers. But what I will say is position players versus pitchers probably see more of those young phenom pitchers first rather than Gilbert or Acuna or Jet Williams on the position player side this year.
You feel like more the position guys are more probably a year away?
Yeah, I do. I think Acuna is a year away. Gilbert, maybe 2025 starting center fielder. We may see him at the end of this year. I think it's a situation where if Harrison Bader playing great defense in center, the Mets need a little offense. They think Drew Gilbert could maybe provide a little more pop than Harrison Bader in center. We may see him at the end of the year because he'll start in AAA, and when you're in AAA, you're a sneeze and a sprained ankle away from getting a phone call. So he'll be ready. He'll be excited for that. But for fans, the future. I came from the minor leagues. I know what some of these kids can do. I can't wait to see when they actually do it. It's just everybody sees social media home runs and they expect social media home runs to happen in real life that same night, every single night, 3 times a night. It just doesn't happen that way. It takes a while.
So Ronnie Mauricio tore his ACL. He's going to miss the rest of the season. How disappointing is that he's going to miss the entire season?
Yeah, Ronnie's been, I've known him for a couple of years. He has always felt like he's been on the outside looking in. As soon as Alvarez came around, everybody forgot about Ronnie. As soon as Beatty came around, everybody forgot about Ronnie. And he was the last one to really come up last year. And when he came up last year, I'm still sitting there going, why did it take so long for this kid to come up? Because he's dynamic. And I really do think if Brett Beatty doesn't figure out third base, this could have been the year where Ronnie Mauricio transitions to third base. Shortstop is taken for the next couple of years with Lindor. Yeah. Second base, that could be a spot for Mauricio, but obviously Jeff McNeil is there. Third base is up for grabs. So Ronnie would be learning third base. I think it's very disappointing. I feel for Ronnie. And I just know for the Mets too, and as far as this year being a competitive year, but also an evaluative year, it's really a missed opportunity for them.
What's your advice to, us fans who are a little pessimistic right now, thinking, what do you tell those fans?
Buddy told me that Killers of the Flower Moon was the worst movie he had ever seen in his entire life. So I went into that 3-hour movie with extremely low expectations, with nowhere to go but up. And I was like, this is a pretty damn good movie, actually. It's when the expectations are sky high, the payroll is sky high, that anything falls short is a disappointment. And if it falls short badly, it's a big disappointment. I kind of like these types of years to be a fan because your expectations are not low, but simmered. And you have the ability to kind of break out of it. I mean, listen, I will call and I will love and I will enjoy 9 innings of 162 Mets games this year. And I am not lying to myself or anybody when I say I'm very excited for 2024 because again, and when you check out this restaurant, it's the best restaurant you ever go to. You take a bite, you're like, it's okay. But if you go in with, medium expectations, you could be open to some good things.
Is it still surreal to be a play-by-play guy for the Mets, a team you grew up rooting for on Long Island?
Yes. It's talking about this with you guys right now is amazing. It's a dream come true because I could do this with the Dayton Dragons, the Frisco Rough Riders, the Brooklyn Cyclones. I could talk your ear off about those players, and everyone would go, "Who?" But to talk about the New York Mets every single night, to talk to the family, friends, neighbors that I grew up with, New Yorkers, talk to them every single night, and they're listening. That's the best dream lived out I could possibly be imagined. So as you're talking about this year and pessimistic Mets fans, you're sadly talking to the wrong guy. I couldn't be more happy to be doing this, especially this year.
So what was your reaction when you found out that you're going to be named the Mets radio broadcast team?
It's just a fulfillment of a lot of hours and sacrifice and loneliness. I mean, I talked to some high school kids about, jumping into the business, and it's not sunshine and roses when you get into it. It's very, very low pay if you get paid at all to do the things you want to do.
Mhm.
And it's you basically don't have a social life, and you're moving away from family and friends. High risk, high reward. If you make it, you make it. If you stink, goodbye. And it's up to you to decide how long you want to hang in it until you figure out I either got it or I don't. So, my wife and we always said, I'll get to 40 years old, and if it's not happening, it's not happening. And to get the call at 29, but also have put in 8, 9, 10 years in the minors, it was a long time. And a lot of people said, "Oh, you got there kind of quick." Yeah, I did compared to most other people that get there, but I've been doing it for a very long time. So it's just very, very cool. And again, if I got the Seattle Mariners job or the Minnesota Twins job, it would be amazing. But to get a job for the New York Mets, it feels like New York is that highest pedestal, and nothing beats it.
For myself and Kevin and Chris, to be able for you to be able to call games with a guy like Howie Rose, for us, we listened to him growing up. I'm sure you did as well. What is it like to be able to say he's my play-by-play partner, and guy that you looked up to growing up?
I mean, I still have to pinch myself because I sat there last year, and there he is making his Hall of Fame acceptance speech on the field, and I'm sitting in his chair doing the game because he was going to be in a suite with his family that day. And I just, I had my chin in my hands, and I'm just watching and soaking it in and looking at the chair, and just take a deep breath and think, man, this guy is he's an establishment. He's a Hall of Famer. He has been in your brain for a long time if you're a Mets fan, and you kind of feel things through the voices that you hear. You watch the Mets, and you hear a Met game through the radio, and you hear Howie, and you feel Howie. Watch TV, you hear and feel Gary. And a lot of that is organic. A lot of that is Howie's an incredible character and personality. And I always say that, especially with Chris Majkowski, our producer, who's kind of a part of the family on the radio. If you listen religiously, Madge, is I'll kind of just sit there and I'll open up my shoulder and I'll look at Howie, and he's telling a story, and oh yeah, I got a game to call too here. And I got to snap back into it because I keep forgetting. He's telling some unbelievable story about Joe Piscopo or Duke Snyder in 1963, and I'm just, what, really? And I'm listening just as the fan is listening. So that's the absolute best part about working with Howie, and he's the best guy too. He's got stories on the air, and my favorite ones are the stories that he can't tell on the air, but I can't tell you those.
Yeah,
I mean, the ones that we want.
Yeah, exactly. For myself and definitely Kevin and Chris, like we grew up listening to Bob Murphy and Ralph Kiner, on the radio and the television. And there's a generation now that Howie Rose is their Ralph Kiner, and even Gary Cohn was on the radio at the time, right? And there's a lot of people he's their generation, he's their broadcaster of their generation on the radio. I mean, a lot of people don't listen to the radio as much anymore as they used to, but it's still like, it's one of those things where he became that guy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really intimate too. That's why I like radio over TV, because TV is a whole production. Radio, it's one person saying words, creating this reality in your head, and through that you can go in a multitude of ways. The way Bob did a game, the way Ralph did a game, the way Howie does a game are all different, and they're just saying words, but the words that they choose and how they say it, there's no replacing any of them. Everybody does it differently. So it's amazing to do this job and to be part of a lineage. I mean, people respect the hell out of the names that have come out of the Mets booth over the years, and to be part of that is, again, I pinch myself and just try not to screw it up, when it's my inning. So that's what I have to say about that.
What have you learned from working with a guy like Howie Rose as far as your approach to calling a game?
So I think that the big league approach is different from just my life in the minor leagues. Mm-hmm. When you're doing a game in the minors, you're talking to families, you're kind of giving updates. How's this prospect doing? But when you're doing a big league game, in the minors, no one's really caring about the who wins and who loses. There's little moments in there. But one thing I had to really get good at last year that Howie tugged me at my arm and pulled me aside, and the game could be decided in the third inning or the fifth inning. There's that big crux moment. Kind of identify that a little bit better. Because I would wait around till about the eighth or the ninth when it really meant something, as I did in the minors. And maybe the game was decided in the fifth inning. And I knew that, but I never portrayed it. It didn't come across in my play-by-play. So it's just pulling on some different strings at different times. That's one thing I learned. Howie's so great at punching up the big moment. I had to get better at that a little bit last year because I can be a little bit mellow. But yeah, that just constantly learning. I mean, I feel like we have a great rapport. The Mets shipped off everybody at the deadline, and I feel like we had more laughs at the end of the year, the last 2 months, than we had the first 3 or 4. Maybe the Mets should have won more games. We would have had more laughs. But our rapport is awesome. And, he's I always say, my 70-year-old new best friend. I mean, I'm 30, he's 70, and we've got to get along for 9 innings, which we gladly do.
As Howie would say, you put a circle around that one, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
What is that? Because it's I don't know if it's really unique to New York, but I know New York really does it more than anyone else, where radio crew, you have multiple play-by-play people versus maybe some other markets, they have a play-by-play guy and an analyst. So a former baseball player, what have you. What kind of dynamic does that present to listeners to have play-by-play guys rotate in and out versus having a play-by-play guy and an analyst?
So it's unique for sure on radio, especially. And it's market by market. I mean, we are pair of play-by-play guys, and then when Pat McCarthy jumps on, he's a third play-by-play guy. Take a look at the Yankees. You have John Sterling, who does basically every game, and there's Susan Waldman doing color for every single game. It's hard to find people. What I've found, it's crazy to me because I did every inning of every minor league game that I was assigned to, is people to give you 9 innings a night, 162 games. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot mentally on people to do, and so just a little bit of a different voice, a different flavor every now and then. For 2 play-by-play guys, I think it's just strictly a matter of splitting the duties a little bit instead of one voice does play-by-play, one does color. It certainly works. Just this is the structure that they've decided on. I mean, it goes back to the Bob and Ralph and Lindsay. That all right, here's Bob Murphy and here's Ralph Kiner, and it's just theirs. So it's every market is different. It's just the way that the Mets have chosen to do it. But yeah, it's for some people. My first year, you read Twitter a little bit. When's Howie going to get back on his innings? But it takes a while. It takes a while to get into people's brains. But once you get in there, hopefully you're there to stay for a while.
Do you ever find yourself with like falling out of like a rhythm when that change happens?
So it's definitely difficult. So when I do a game by myself, Howie will do 100 games this year. I'll take the lead on the other 62. Once you're starting in the first inning, juices are flowing. You're laying out the defensive alignment. You're giving the starting lineup. You're introducing the starting pitcher. You basically then go into the first 2 innings and you're recapping what happened yesterday. And there's a flow. There's a rhythm there. And then when you toss it to your partner to the third inning, like Howie will, when we're together, I'll do the third and the fourth. He'll throw it to me for the third. I'll have to go, okay, well, Howie just said all these things that I would have said if I started the game. You got to pick it up. He's passing the baton and it's your turn to run around the track. Track's a little bit different though. So it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I will literally, when I do a book and I prepare, if I'm doing the game and I'm leading, I'll prepare one way. If Howie's leading and I'm coming on second, I won't talk about the obvious thing that the top story of the day for that player. I have to come up with B and C and D because Howie would have hit that already. So it's difficult. You have to learn that. I remember in the beginning of the year, because I had done so many minor league games by myself, I forgot what it was like to be the second in command and have that muscle. So Howie would do the game, and You go through the lineup. Okay, here's your first batter. Blah blah blah. It says a news fact. I look at my book. I go, well, I can't say that. Well, I can't say that. Well, I can't say that because he just said it all. And so that forces you to go, all right, let's get creative. Let's find something fun and unique about this player or different ways of doing it. So that's why I love the challenge. Though it's really every night it's fun. And that's the other thing too. Where's Howie going to go? Is he serious tonight? Are we talking baseball or is he going to have a little more fun? And maybe I can steal some of those facts that he had. That's part of building a chemistry as well with somebody.
And what's the dynamic like when it's you and Howie versus you and Pat?
Howie is, if you look at the strengths of all three, is that Howie's so knowledgeable about the Mets, and he's done this, and the way he calls a big play, or the way he calls a play where the Mets blow it in the eighth inning, and he has that exasperated fall out of your chair, I can't believe this happened feeling. I can't replicate that. I need a couple more seasons of Mets baseball maybe, and I could replicate that. But that's what makes Howie so good. People always say, man, I felt what Howie was saying. I felt exactly what he was saying, and that's an art form. That is why he's in the Hall of Fame. That's where we all aspire to be. And, Pat and I really were just kind of getting our feet wet last year. Here's what I can do. Prospect coming up from AAA. I can hit, I can pitch, I can throw a little bit. How will I fit in the major leagues? And you just hope that your fastball that got guys out at AAA is going to get guys out of the big leagues, which is something that we had to learn. But I think for people who listen to me and to Pat, it takes a while to really introduce yourself to somebody. I like to crack a few more jokes maybe than most people like to do. A little bit of a dry sense of humor every once in a while. I mean, those things take time to come across. But we're just getting started. And I love working with Pat. Pat is again a big teddy bear, as I said at the beginning, and I know you can hear our youthful energy come through when we're doing games, because we're the little babies of the broadcast booth next to the old guy sometimes.
When a player goes through their career, they progress from the lower level of the minors to single A, double A, triple A majors. Do broadcasters follow that same path? I mean, for your career, you started with the Long Island Ducks, then went to double A, calling games for the double A Frisco Rough Riders, and then single A Brooklyn, and then to the majors. So are broadcasters' progressions any similar to players' progressions through the minors and the majors?
Yeah, so I love this because when I was on the bus in the minor leagues, I used to ask the players questions all day, and they go, "Hey, Rad, we got a question for you. How do you get to the major leagues? What's the path? You go up do you come with us to double A? Do you come with us to triple A?" I go, "I wish it was that easy."
Yeah, right. Imagine that.
That was the best. So when you learn, that's when I was coming out of college. That's the way that I saw some people's path going. So I started at A ball, and then independent ball, and then double A. And then when I got to double A in Frisco, which is really right outside of Dallas, it's a major market area, I started to see a different writing on the wall. My goal was always to come back to New York and do New York baseball, because to me that was the pinnacle. My friends weren't going to respect me if I was doing the Seattle Mariners gig or the Twins. I needed to get back to the Mets, something right in front of their faces. So I saw the way that the media was around, the decision makers were around, and I thought, if I got a job at AAA, a lot of those AAA places are, El Paso or Sacramento. I mean, certainly there's some bigger markets there, but you're just in AAA by name. So I went back to New York. I went back to short season A, which was only 76 games, and I had people in the business, friends, who said, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing going back to single A? Are you giving us, is this like the beginning of the end?" But I kind of thought, let me get back to New York. Let me see the way that if I can slide somebody a tape in New York and be around, as I saw people do it in Dallas, maybe that was the way to get to the big leagues. And Brooklyn actually went from short season to high A, so it went back to full season, and that was pretty helpful. But a lot of people, especially decision makers, thought of the Cyclones as still, the rinky-dink short season Class A affiliate of the New York Mets. So it is crazy, I guess. I mean, it was for people single A to the major leagues, certainly. But I always wanted to be a big league broadcaster wherever I was. That mentality of if it sounds big league down here, maybe it'll sound big league up there, no matter what level you're at the minor leagues.
Did you ever think about saying, you know what, maybe this wasn't the best decision and I should try to go to like another AA team or try to work my way up to a AAA team before going up to the majors?
So I think that being in Brooklyn, working for the same team for multiple years, being a New York Mets employee when Sterling Equities, the Wilpons owned us, and then Steve Cohen bought the team, and to stay there and make contacts with people and go to spring training, and I knew the players and I knew the coaches because I'd been there for multiple years. When you have that level of familiarity, it just helps in getting to know people, and hopefully they get to know you. Problem is that the Odyssey and WCBS 880, they're not Mets employees, so you still have to kind of get in front of the right people. But I never thought about leaving New York. I just thought, because I had kind of made up my mind to go from AA back to New York, no matter what, this is the way I'm going to do it. If I'm going to do it, this is the way. I'm just going to try to make it the New York route and have people know who I am. That was it. And then it really was getting validation and feedback from big league broadcasters I send my tape to. And once you have that, at the end of the day, I hate to say it and minimize it, but if you sound good enough, if it sounds like it's it. And there's a lot of guys that are working on it. Some guys will never have it. I really hate to say that because I know so many amazing people that do it for so long and they love it, but they might not have it. And that's what I was always searching for. Am I good enough to do this? Am I waiting till 40 and then I read the handwriting on the wall that I'm not that good? But once I would get feedback from big league guys that say, hey, this sounds good, try this, or say this word, or work on it. Once I had a lot of solid feedback, I thought, okay, now I'm going to send my stuff to decision makers, because I never wanted to do it until I felt like I was ready, and I just wanted some time to work on it. Was patient enough, refed a bunch of hockey games and delivered as many pizzas as I could in the meantime to make ends meet. And then hopefully, once you send the tape out, cross your fingers, hopefully made enough contacts to get in the door.
When did you actually become interested in broadcasting?
MVP baseball 2005 in my living room. My mother's like, you're commentating your own game.
That's great.
But eventually I got to college and I had no idea what I wanted to do, but a pretty strong writer. So I just majored in communications, joined the radio station, did a music show. And the kids that were running the station said, you got to be on a committee, pick a committee. And I said, okay, here's my committee choices. They go, we need somebody for sports. All right, great. What do I know? So that's how I got started in it. I was, bored up. I'd hear the juniors and seniors send the game down the line. I'd put them up and then I put the commercials on and I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. And then once they said, hey, we're going to put you on a soccer game and do color commentary with this older kid. And then you start to build an interest in it. I mean, I'll never forget that the story I always tell is that I was doing a Dayton-Richmond men's soccer game at Beaujon Field in Dayton, Ohio, my freshman year with Kevin Christen. And I was so awful that after the game, even my mother was like, your parents are always like, we love you. Even after the game, she goes, maybe you want to try something else. And I thought, wow, that must have really been awful, atrocious. So that to me was, and my mother is very honest and loving and has been great, but it was a challenge to me. I'm kind of a stubborn, this little Irish, this little Italian in there, a little stubborn. People tell me I can't do something, I'm a big person and showing them kind of thing. And it was just like a mini challenge. And I remember that game thinking, okay, I was awful, but wait a minute, I grew up listening to these people. I could start to study this and I get it. I love sports. Let me listen to the broadcasters and figure it out. So, it was really college, getting exposed to it and having that kind of wake up call and then just doing it. And I always preach that to kids is just do games, do innings, do basketball games, do the tape recorder thing up in the seats, do it in your living room, just work like crazy.
But how well did you know soccer back then? Like, did you actually understand the sport, or was it just kind of like I got thrown into it, so I'm just gonna do it and whatever happens, happens type thing?
Yeah, I remember it was TV, so it's on the color commentator on TV to do most of the talking. I played soccer when I was 8, that was about it. So I just kept saying these same things over and over again, and I to this day I don't like soccer. I really don't call much soccer anymore. And it was awkward. But it was that uncomfortable feeling of the mic's on, say something. And that feeling, that uncomfortability was, okay, let me figure this out. But when you start to do multiple sports, you realize what you're better at and what you're not good at. And soccer is not my forte.
So aside, probably aside from Howie Rose, who are some other broadcasters that have influenced you along the way?
So you have to listen to everybody. And I preface that because I do love John Sterling's conversational style. Certainly that is high as far as gone, the A-Rod from A-Rod, all the big calls, but the way him and Susan, their rapport is, to me, great. It's comforting, it's comfortable, it's funny. I mean, they talk about, I'm kind of an old soul, so I remember one of the Sterling home run calls, Joey Gallo, it's Pal Joey. It's like a Sinatra movie from the 1700s. But I love that kind of stuff. I just love that old mentality and some of the old jokes. But probably the guy that I love is Al Michaels. I know in 2024, Al's, as Andrew Marchand for the Post would say, he's lost a couple of miles per hour on the fastball. But at his best, I think he's what I want to be as far as conversational. Those Sunday night games that I would be in college and him and Collinsworth would do it. I heard somebody refer to it as you felt like you were having a bourbon and a cigar and you're just sitting in a lounge and these two guys are telling you the game. To me, that's my vibe. That's my style. Just talk to me. But there'd be entertaining and inflection. But that was Al Michaels was my guy. And then I go back and I'd hear Miracle on Ice and I think, wow, his voice was pretty high back in 1980. It changes over the years.
For you, what does your off season look like? Do you call games for other places during the baseball off season?
I usually do. I usually do a little college basketball, a little NBA G League. I usually do some football. This off season, though, I was daddy daycare. My wife and I had our first child in September.
Congrats!
Congratulations!
So, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So, the season is so long. So to be home I literally did one basketball game in November. The season is so long. I just wanted to be present because it has a lot to do with the 9 years in the minor leagues. The season would end and it's Monday through Friday, doing sales, selling tickets. You get right back to the grind. And I just thought, hey, we're in a good spot right now. Let's just stay home and enjoy some family time and see my daughter grow. She's now 5.5 months. Changed a heck of a lot of diapers, and I've got a heck of a lot more in front of me still. But it's been great. But usually it's next off season back to college football, college basketball, some college football as well.
Keith, we appreciate your time. And just one final question here for you. We just wanted to get your thoughts and your reaction to Oakland naming Jenny Cavner the first female play-by-play voice in Major League Baseball history.
Yeah, so Jenny is, I think, the first primary voice in MLB history, which is terrific. That in the minor leagues, I've known some women here and there that have been trying to get to the major leagues. And to be honest with you, it's been so unfair. I take this from a personal standpoint of sending out tapes. Everybody's opinion is so subjective, and what frustrates me is, a woman sounds a little different it just sounds different. And to fight that stupid subjectivity is so annoying to me. I mean, I remember I was working with somebody in the minor leagues. I'm not going to mention who it was. And we're doing our book and there was no game on. The Yankee game was on. So I put the Yankee game on and listening because I'm just trying to, and Susan starts talking and my partner goes, "Is that a woman?" I go, "What do you mean? Is that a woman? That?" "Yes, she's a legend. What are you talking about?" So I am so happy for Jenny because that hopefully kicks down the door of just the way it goes in your ear. it goes in your ear, and it's a good sound. Is she doing a good job? Does she know what she's talking about? Are you enjoying listening to her? And so I'm just happy because there's so many great women out there that are doing a great job, working their tails off, and some decision maker just it just doesn't have that. There's something missing. I don't know what it is. Yes, you know what it is. You don't know. You haven't heard that sound enough. So I'm so happy for her. The Melanie Newmans of the world, the Beth Mowens, and the minor league ladies out there too that I know. Emma Tiedemann does an amazing job. These people need their opportunities to get up there, and she's gonna be kind of that Mount Rushmore person. So I'm happy for her.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast, and best wishes this year and all the continued success on your spectacular career. So we really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And hopefully you'll be listening this year. Thanks.
And that was Keith Raad, play-by-play voice of the New York Mets on WCBS Radio, alongside Pat McCarthy and Mets Hall of Famer Howie Rose. It's a fantastic radio booth, and man, it was great to spend some time with Keith and learned a lot of great things, really, about behind the scenes, right? What does it take to put together a broadcast and to work with the legendary Howie Rose?
Yeah, I was fascinated to hear, that question that you asked about, his trek, going from, to a higher level and then coming back down to a lower level and being like, what are you doing? Why would you do something like that? You know what I mean? Because in my head, I thought the same type of thing. I know he was coming back to New York City, which obviously is, the media capital of the world, but, it's still minor league baseball. So how does that work? So I was very interested in what he had to say about that.
It was a gamble, right? He bet on himself and he won.
He definitely won.
He won, and he's got it.
Yeah.
Like he said, either you got it, or you don't got it. And he's got it.
I wanted to ask about, he mentioned like the players would say, are you coming with us when we go up, if we go up to AA and things like that? I kind of was curious to ask. I didn't ask the question, but I was curious to know, like, you're about the same age as a lot of these guys, right? He still is basically about the same age as a lot of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, him and Alonso are pretty much the same age. Like how's that interaction, and I'm, versus, an older, broadcaster and a younger guy, things like that. But I would have been curious to hear his answer to that.
I would have been curious to know the stories that Howie Rose tells off the air, because I'm sure those are really good.
Yeah, I would love to hear some of those stories.
Well, you're not going to know, and you never will know.
I know. That's a bummer.
One day,
Sunday,
maybe. You never know.
So we record this on a Monday evening. This will air on a Wednesday, right? Every other Wednesday is when our podcast hits. And to change the topic a little bit, guys, to get to the more along the lines of what Throwing Bagels is all about. We are looking at a SUNYAC semifinal playoff game for the Oswego State Lakers coming up this weekend, and 90% chance that they will be hosting Plattsburgh.
Again.
Here we go again.
Yeah. It's
I've seen this movie many times.
Deja vu.
And the outcome was not usually the one that I wanted.
It's not even bagels that we would be throwing on the ice. It's pretty much anything you can grab your hand just to throw it on the ice because you're mad.
Yeah, mad.
Seeing that smirk of Emery walking off the ice.
Yeah. Well, at least he's not there anymore. So
I know. But it's ingrained in my mind.
Yes, it is. I remember like one year, I think it was a playoff game or regular season. In any case, we were at the game, and there was Plattsburgh, and I think Plattsburgh beat Oswego that night. So a bunch of us went over to the press box, just get some beers and eat, get some food, whatever. And so we're all sitting there chatting, and in comes Plattsburgh fans all in their jerseys. And then the players come in, and then head coach Bob Emery comes in. And he's got that smirk, like, yeah, how you like that? And we said, I think we'll head out now. Check, please. And so
that's when you go Outsiders or West Side Story on them.
Yeah, right. Okay. 100-3. Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair fight right there. But the thing is, Oswego really doesn't happen often, but they beat Plattsburgh twice in the regular season.
Right.
And it's a cliche. I know it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a year, but those 2 games don't matter. You got to really reset the clock and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But that's what scares me.
Right. And that's the part. It's, you've had, it's been kind of an up and down season, for, you sweep Plattsburgh, you can't beat Portland.
Yeah.
And yet you're in the semifinals of the SUNYAC championships and you get a chance to play Plattsburgh for a 3rd time, and Plattsburgh fans, I'm sure, will be saying 3rd time's a charm, that's what they want. That's what they want. So hopefully it's just like the whiteout game, complete domination in the first period, and just kind of saw it through to the end and got the winners late in the 3rd. So yeah, we'll see.
When was the last time we could ever say, if ever, we did not beat Portland once in a season?
Yeah, that's the wild part.
I can't even in our time at Oswego, that thought never would have crossed my mind to hear something like that.
Not at all. Like
it's really a statement of how far the Cortland program has come. Because they were bad. Like Cortland, they do their sports well. Like you name a sport and they do it well.
Yes.
But hockey had been the exception for so long, and now it's no longer an exception. They are building a strong program, and it's not that Oswego has gotten worse. It's just that Cortland has gotten better.
Right.
Yes.
Agreed. That's just it.
Agreed.
But you're right, Jay. I mean, Oswego lost to Cortland in the regular. They lost 2 games, and they tied in Oswego's mid-season tournament. So 0-2-1 against Cortland. That's rare, if ever. I don't know if that's ever happened to Oswego before. But again, now that we're in the playoffs, a whole new game.
And let's not forget the Oswego men's basketball team is going to be in the semifinals of the SUNYAC because they get a bye in the first round because they are 17-0 in conference,
Man,
24-1, really 24-1 overall.
Yeah.
The next closest team was, I believe, Oneonta at 12-6.
Yeah.
So, let's not forget about them, that they're going to be playing this weekend as well.
Well, and we'll definitely see them in the NCAA tournament. That's
I mean, they're number 4 in the country, I believe, at this point.
So what they made it to the Elite 8 last year, right? The final 8 teams last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be surprised if they don't make it to the same point, and hopefully they'll take that next step and get into the Final 4.
Yeah, I mean, they had 1 loss this year, and that was in that D3 Hoops Classic in their first game when they lost to Case Western Reserve, who's also a pretty highly ranked team. Mm-hmm. So, hopefully they learn from that, and when they get into the tournament and can use that as a stepping stone.
For sure.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people listening were like, "Oh, you went from Mets to Oswego pretty quickly there. That was a very fast turnaround." But that's throwing bagels for you, maybe.
That's right.
We're here to throw some bagels.
That's what we do around here.
That's
but
right.
We're also here to say, if you look at 2024 for the Mets, we go back to that. Honestly, there is some room there to be pleasantly surprised. I guess we'll put it that way, because think about last year. Pretty much everyone on the roster played below their career average. So what are the odds that happens again this season?
I mean, McNeil had an off year last year, a very off year last year. Alonso hit 230 something. And to be quite honest with you, he's in majority of his career, he's never really hit below 260. No. He had 1 bad year, but that was also the 2020 season of average wise, at least. So, he's usually a 260-ish hitter, which is obviously, not horrible. It's not great, but it's not horrible. But for a power hitter like him, I'll take that all day. And what he said in his press conference the other day was he wants to work on, on his on his eye, and just make sure that he doesn't chase as many pitches as he did last year. That's what he was working on this offseason, is this chase rate.
Yeah. And I don't think it's as much the hitting that anyone worries about as much as the pitching and what the bullpen is going to be like. And, we're going to see Edwin Diaz back at full strength. And those questions still remain for the Mets. And that was a problem last year as well. So if they do pleasantly surprise us, it's going to be because of the pitching staff.
Yeah. And I don't think their bullpen is going to be as bad as a lot of people are saying. I think they have a decent back end of the bullpen. It's obviously that middle relief, but I think they have some decent middle relievers out there. And, I also read earlier that guy Fujinami that they brought in, he apparently is better than people are giving him credit for. So, if he can imagine if he comes out of nowhere and he can start games or he's at least just a very good middle reliever, that's a huge step for them.
Yeah. It's really going to depend on how Diaz looks. I mean, I've said it before. I don't see him twirling another season like he did a couple of years ago. I just don't see it. I think he's going to regress a little bit, but even then he's still one of the better closers in baseball.
Yeah. But a regression is as long as he doesn't go back to his first season with the Mets, a regression from his last season he played for the Mets is, a normal year for any closer. I'll take that any day of the week.
For sure. For sure. Yes.
By the way, one correction. It's New Paltz and Brockport that had 12-6 records, not Oneonta.
Wow. That's actually surprising.
Yeah.
Well, I think that will do it for this edition of the Throwing Bagels podcast. Boy, we had 2 baseball play-by-play guys on the podcast this week.
Baseball heavy.
Baseball
Spring
heavy
training.
Baby. That's right. It's finally here.
Looking forward to it.
And on our next podcast, we will be joined by Brent Axe, our point of trivia, our first ever Throwing Bagels podcast guest. He will be returning to talk about some Syracuse hoops as the ACC tournament is right around the corner. So that'll be a great interview. So we're looking forward to talking to Brent. But until then, you can check us out online, throwingbagels.com. You can email us, throwingbagelspodcast@gmail.com. We'll hope to hear from you soon. Jason.
Happy birthday, Joe.
Happy birthday, Joe Yurden. Yes. Jason, Chris, been a pleasure as always.
Yes, sir.
Good night.
Enjoy.
Good night and good day. And whenever you happen to listen to this, we'll see you later.